There's a strange moment that almost every man has experienced at some point in his life. You meet a woman you genuinely like. You become more interested, so naturally you give her more attention, more messages, more compliments, more availability, more effort, and somehow the more you try to make her feel wanted, the less she seems to want you. Meanwhile, there's another kind of man. He's interested, but he isn't frantic. He listens, but he doesn't over-explain himself. He can be warm without becoming needy. He can walk away from disrespect without making a dramatic announcement. He has a life that existed before she arrived, and it will continue if she leaves. And sometimes, almost mysteriously, that man becomes the one she keeps thinking about. That's where Machiavelli becomes interesting, not because romance should become a game of manipulation, and certainly not because women are some puzzle men need to control, but because Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable about human nature. People respond not only to what you say, but to what your behavior communicates about your position, your confidence, your priorities, and your dependence on their approval. So today we're going to explore 5 Machiavellian rules of attraction, but we're going to translate them into something healthier and more useful for a modern man. The goal isn't to become cruel, distant, or emotionally unavailable. The goal is to understand why the man who can say, "I want you, but I don't need to lose myself to have you," often carries a completely different presence. And the first rule is probably the hardest one for a man who really likes someone. Stop chasing. Let her have room to come toward you. Think back to a time when you really wanted a woman. Maybe you checked your phone every few minutes. Maybe you sent another message because she hadn't answered the first one. Maybe you rearranged your schedule whenever she suggested meeting. Maybe you became unusually agreeable because you thought, somewhere in the back of your mind, that if you were attentive enough, generous enough, available enough, eventually she would realize how valuable you were. And here's the uncomfortable question. Were you actually expressing interest, or were you trying to earn reassurance? There's a difference. Interest says, "I like you, and I'd enjoy spending time with you." Chasing says, "I need you to like me so I can feel okay." The behavior can look almost identical from the outside, but psychologically they're completely different. A man who is interested can send the message, put his phone down, and continue with his evening. A man who is chasing sends the message and then mentally moves into her phone, watching for the little notification that will tell him whether he's still wanted. That's where attraction can become painful. Your attention stops being something you freely give and becomes a request for validation. And when another person senses that all your emotional energy is waiting on their response, the dynamic changes. You're no longer meeting her as an equal. You're placing her judgment above your own. Now, there is an important distinction here. I'm not telling you to deliberately wait 3 hours to reply because she waited 3 hours. That's not confidence, that's bookkeeping. I'm not telling you to pretend you're busy when you're not, disappear for days, or manufacture scarcity. That's still chasing. You're just chasing while pretending not to chase. Real confidence is simpler. You actually have things to do. You actually have people to see. You actually have interests that matter to you. You don't need to manufacture distance because your life already has shape. Research gives us one interesting piece of this puzzle. In a 2011 study by Erin Whitchurch, Timothy Wilson, and Daniel Gilbert, women were shown profiles of men who supposedly liked them a lot, an average amount, or whose level of interest was uncertain. The women in the uncertain condition reported thinking about the men more, and that uncertainty was associated with greater attraction in that particular experimental setting. But notice the important limitation. This doesn't prove that playing hard to get makes women attracted to you. It was a specific study with college women, and a very specific setup. What it does show is that uncertainty can sometimes increase mental attention, and mental attention can influence attraction. So the lesson isn't become confusing. The lesson is don't eliminate every opportunity for curiosity by giving everything away immediately. There is a difference between being unavailable and having a life. If she messages you while you're working, finish what you're doing. If you're at dinner with friends, enjoy dinner. If you're exercising, exercise. If you want to see her, ask her out clearly. "I'd like to see you Thursday, are you free?" Then let the answer be the answer. No emotional negotiation, No second message 5 minutes later. No, did I do something wrong? If she says yes, great. If she says no and doesn't offer another time, you have information. That's the mature version of letting her come toward you. And here's your first reflection moment. Ask yourself honestly, when you pursue someone, are you expressing affection or are you trying to control the outcome? Because you can't control attraction. You can only control the quality of the man you're bringing into the interaction. That leads directly into rule number 2. Keep some mystery, but don't confuse mystery with dishonesty. One of the fastest ways to make a new connection feel strangely heavy is to reveal your entire emotional world before the relationship has had time to develop. A woman asks, "Tell me about yourself," and suddenly you're giving her the autobiography. Your childhood, your divorce, your 5-year plan, your previous relationship, your deepest fears, your entire schedule for the next month, every opinion you've ever had. And you're doing it because you want her to understand you. But understanding takes time. That's what makes it meaningful. Imagine meeting someone for the first time and reading the last chapter of a novel before you've even finished the first page. Technically, you know more. Emotionally, you've lost the experience of discovery. Healthy mystery isn't about hiding important truths. It's about pacing. You don't need to answer every question with your entire history. You don't need to narrate every moment of your day. You don't need to post every thought online so that someone can know exactly what you're doing at every hour. Let people experience you. Suppose she asks what you do for fun. Instead of listing 15 hobbies, you might tell her about the one thing you're genuinely passionate about. Maybe you restore old motorcycles. Maybe you spend Sunday mornings hiking. Maybe you've been learning piano for 3 years. Tell her enough to make the conversation interesting, and then ask about her. Later, she discovers another side of you. That's not manipulation. That's simply how human relationships normally develop. And here's where the Machiavellian idea becomes useful. You don't need to reveal every intention, every feeling, and every plan immediately. But don't turn that into emotional unavailability. If you like her, let her know. If you're interested, act interested. The mystery is in the depth of your life, not in confusing her about whether you care. There's another reason this matters. Today, people often have unprecedented access to each other's lives. Social media can tell someone what you ate, where you went, who you met, what you bought, what you believe, and what mood you're in before they've even spoken to you. When everything is visible, there is very little left to discover. So one practical change is surprisingly simple. Stop documenting your entire life for an audience. Live more of it than you publish. If you have an interesting experience, you don't have to immediately turn it into evidence that you're interesting. If you go somewhere beautiful, you don't have to prove you were there. If you're working towards something, you don't need to announce every step. Let results speak. And when you're dating, allow conversations to breathe. If she asks a question, answer honestly, but don't feel compelled to fill every silence. Comfortable silence is different from nervous silence. A man who can sit quietly without scrambling to impress communicates something powerful. I don't need to perform to deserve your attention. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, how much of your personality do you reveal because you genuinely want to share it? And how much do you reveal because you're afraid that if she doesn't know everything about you, she'll lose interest? That question can expose a lot. Because sometimes oversharing isn't openness. Sometimes it's anxiety wearing the clothes of honesty. And once you understand that, we arrive at the third rule. Master your emotions. This is where the idea of the cold one can become dangerous if you misunderstand it. The cold man isn't necessarily the attractive man. A man who feels nothing isn't impressive. A man who can't communicate isn't mysterious. A man who becomes silent every time something bothers him isn't emotionally strong. Real composure is different. It means you feel the emotion, but the emotion doesn't automatically get to choose your behavior. Imagine she doesn't reply for 6 hours. The insecure reaction is immediate. Why is she ignoring me? Then another thought. Maybe she's talking to someone else. Then another. Fine, I'll ignore her too. Then you're angry at a story you created in your own head. You send something sharp. She responds later and says she was in a meeting. Now you have to clean up a problem that didn't exist. Emotional mastery would have looked completely different. You notice the anxiety, you don't obey it, you continue your day. When she replies, you respond normally. That's strength. Or imagine she cancels a date. You might be disappointed, that's normal. You don't have to pretend you're thrilled. You can simply say, "No problem, let me know when you know your schedule." Then you move on. If she repeatedly cancels without making any effort to reschedule, that's different. Now you're not dealing with an emotion, you're dealing with information. You can decide that the pattern doesn't work for you. This distinction is incredibly important. Composure doesn't mean tolerating everything. It means responding instead of reacting. Research on self-determination and relationships gives us another useful piece here. Self-determination theory, developed by Richard Ryan and Edward Deci, emphasizes autonomy, competence, and relatedness as basic psychological needs. In relationship research, autonomy isn't about being detached. It's about being able to participate by choice rather than feeling controlled or compelled. Studies have also linked autonomy in romantic relationships with more constructive responses to disagreement and greater relationship satisfaction. In everyday language, that means a strong relationship doesn't require two people to lose themselves inside each other. You can be close and still remain yourself. You can care deeply and still make decisions deliberately. And this is where emotional control becomes attractive. Not because women supposedly want robots, but because nobody enjoys being responsible for another adult's emotional stability. A partner should be able to say, "I'm having a hard day," without fearing that their partner will collapse, explode, punish them, or demand constant reassurance. So here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel triggered by something a woman does, don't respond immediately unless it's genuinely urgent. Give yourself 10 minutes. Take a walk. Breathe. Write down what actually happened. Then write down the story you're telling yourself about what happened. "She didn't reply" is a fact. "She's losing interest because I'm not good enough" is an interpretation. Those are not the same thing. The difficulty here is high because emotional habits don't disappear just because you've understood them intellectually. But with repetition, the improvement can be significant. Fewer impulsive messages, fewer arguments that shouldn't have happened, and more conversations where you can actually say what you mean. And now we reach something even deeper, because emotional control without boundaries can turn into quiet suffering. That's Rule 4. Set boundaries and command respect, not by demanding respect, but by behaving like someone whose time and dignity matter. Think about the man who says yes to everything. She cancels repeatedly. He says it's fine. She insults him as a joke. He laughs even though it bothers him. She only calls when she needs something. He drops everything. He thinks he's being loving. But underneath that generosity is often fear. If I say no, maybe she'll leave. And that fear teaches both people something. It teaches you that keeping her requires abandoning yourself. It teaches her that there is no meaningful consequence when your boundaries are crossed. A boundary isn't a threat. It isn't, "Do this or else." A boundary is, "This is what I will and won't participate in." That's a completely different statement. Suppose she consistently arrives 45 minutes late without explanation. You don't need a dramatic speech. You can say, "I enjoy seeing you, but I don't like waiting around without knowing what's happening. If we're going to make plans, I need us to respect the agreed time." That's clear. If she understands and changes, excellent. If nothing changes, your boundary becomes an action. You stop making plans that repeatedly put you in that position. That's the part many people miss. A boundary without action is just a preference. You don't have to punish anyone. You simply decide what you will participate in, and this applies in both directions. If you're dating someone who has different needs, that's not automatically disrespect. If she needs more space than you do, that's not necessarily rejection. If she disagrees with you, that's not a boundary violation. A mature man learns the difference between discomfort and disrespect. That's crucial. You can't build a healthy relationship by labeling every disagreement as a test. Sometimes people simply disagree. Sometimes someone is busy. Sometimes a relationship isn't a match. The goal isn't to win every interaction. The goal is to remain self-respecting while allowing another adult to remain free. Research on autonomy in romantic relationships supports this broader picture. Autonomy and constructive responses to conflict are associated with healthier relationship functioning, not domination or control. So if your boundary is real, state it calmly. Don't deliver it in anger. Don't announce it to make yourself look powerful. And don't create boundaries you have no intention of keeping. The expected difficulty is moderate to high, especially if you're used to being agreeable. The realistic improvement is not that every woman suddenly respects you. The improvement is that you stop abandoning yourself to keep someone else. And ironically, that changes the kind of relationships you remain available for. Now let's ask the uncomfortable question. Have you ever accepted behavior you knew you shouldn't accept simply because you were afraid of losing someone? If the answer is yes, don't beat yourself up. Most people have done it. But understand what that fear costs. You don't only lose dignity in that moment. You train yourself to believe that love requires self-betrayal. And that brings us to the fifth rule, the one underneath all the others. Remain sovereign. Put your purpose first. This is where the cold one idea finally reveals what it was really pointing toward. The cold man isn't attractive because he's cold. He's attractive when he is attractive at all because he appears internally governed. His life isn't being run by whoever happens to text him last. He has somewhere to go, something to build, people to care about, standards he intends to keep. He doesn't need a woman to give his life meaning because his life already has meaning, and that doesn't mean he doesn't want love. In fact, it allows him to love better. Think about two men who fall for the same woman. The first man immediately reorganizes his entire life. His gym routine disappears, his friends disappear, his work becomes secondary. His hobbies become something he used to do. Every free hour belongs to her. At first, she may enjoy the intensity. It feels romantic. But eventually something strange can happen. Instead of feeling chosen, she starts feeling responsible. His happiness seems to depend on her availability. If she wants a night alone, he becomes disappointed. If she travels, he struggles. If she is busy, he feels rejected. The second man behaves differently. He makes room for her, but he doesn't erase himself. He still goes to the gym. He still sees his friends. He still works on his business. He still reads. He still takes care of his family. He still has his own interests. When they're together, he's present. When they're apart, he's living. That is sovereignty. And there is actual psychological research behind the value of autonomy. Self-determination theory argues that autonomy, competence, and relatedness are fundamental psychological needs, and research has repeatedly examined how supporting autonomy can contribute to relationship quality and well-being. That doesn't mean ignore your partner. It means a relationship works better when closeness doesn't require the destruction of individuality. Here's a practical version for your life. Choose 3 things that existed before the woman you're dating and that you genuinely want to preserve. It could be your health, your work, your friendships, your faith, your craft, your education, your responsibilities, or simply the quiet time you need to think. Put them on the calendar, protect them. Then choose time for the relationship too. This isn't about pretending to be busy. It's about refusing to become empty. The difficulty is real because falling in love naturally changes priorities. That's part of being human. The goal isn't rigid independence. The goal is balance. You want her, but you don't need to become someone else to keep her. You love her, but you don't surrender the entire architecture of your identity. And there's something else that happens when you live this way. You stop approaching relationships as auditions. You're no longer thinking, how do I convince her I'm good enough? You're thinking, do we actually fit? Do our values work together? Do we enjoy each other's company? Do we respect each other? Can we build something healthy? That's a completely different psychological position. You're not sitting across from someone begging to be selected. You're 2 adults discovering whether you should choose each other. And that may be the deepest meaning behind all 5 Machiavellian rules. Stop chasing, keep some mystery. Master your emotions, set boundaries, remain sovereign. Notice what all 5 have in common. None of them actually require you to manipulate a woman. They require you to stop manipulating yourself. You stop telling yourself that more attention will guarantee affection. You stop telling yourself that revealing everything immediately will guarantee intimacy. You stop telling yourself that every uncomfortable feeling needs an immediate response. You stop telling yourself that tolerating disrespect is the price of love, and you stop telling yourself that another person must become the center of your existence. That's why the title of this video is She Craves the Cold One. But the real lesson is not to become cold, it's to become calm. There is a massive difference. Cold says, I don't care. Calm says, I care, but I can handle what I feel. Cold says, you can't reach me. Calm says, you can reach me, but you don't control me. Cold says, I need nobody. Calm says, I enjoy people, but I can stand on my own. Coldness creates distance. Composure creates space. And healthy space allows two people to choose each other instead of clinging to each other. Remember that research on uncertainty? It suggests that in one particular experimental setting, uncertainty increased attraction and made participants think more about potential partners. But if you take that finding and turn it into a dating trick, deliberately disappearing, withholding affection, creating jealousy, you've missed the point. The useful lesson is not to manufacture uncertainty. It's to stop eliminating all curiosity by making yourself constantly available and completely predictable. Let attraction breathe. Let people discover you. Let them choose. And if they don't choose you, let that information exist without turning it into a judgment on your worth. That's the part many men never learn. Rejection isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's simply incompatibility. Sometimes timing is wrong. Sometimes the other person doesn't feel what you feel. And a sovereign man can accept that without collapsing. He can say, I wanted this, but I won't force it. That sentence contains enormous strength. So here's your final exercise. Over the next 7 days, don't try to become more attractive. Try to become more self-directed. When you feel the urge to send another message for reassurance, pause. When you're tempted to cancel something important just because someone else became available, think twice. When someone crosses a line, address it calmly instead of swallowing it. When you feel jealous, separate facts from stories. When you're tempted to tell someone everything because you're afraid they'll lose interest, slow down and let the relationship unfold. And most importantly, spend time doing something that has nothing to do with dating. Build something, learn something, exercise, call an old friend, finish the project you've been postponing, sit somewhere quiet without your phone. You may discover something surprising. The more complete your life becomes, the less desperate you feel for another person to complete it. And that changes how you walk into a room. It changes how you speak. It changes how you listen. It changes how you handle rejection. It changes how you love. The real attraction isn't created when you convince someone that you're valuable. It begins when you stop behaving as though their approval is the evidence of your value. That's the Machiavellian lesson worth keeping. Not manipulation, not cruelty, not emotional games, but strategic self-command. Know your position, know your standards, know your purpose. Don't give away your entire world simply because someone smiled at you. Don't become emotionally unavailable just because you've been hurt. Don't confuse masculinity with silence. Don't confuse confidence with arrogance. And don't confuse being desired with being loved. What you want is something deeper. A woman who chooses you while you remain fully yourself. And a relationship where both people can say, I want you in my life, without secretly meaning, I cannot function without you. So if you've been chasing, stop for a moment. Not to make her chase you, but to find out what you're running away from in yourself. If you've been trying too hard to impress, ask yourself what you're afraid would happen if you simply allowed someone to experience you as you are. If you've been accepting disrespect, ask yourself what you're teaching yourself about what you deserve. And if you've lost your purpose inside a relationship, ask yourself what part of your old life is waiting for you to return. Because the strongest man isn't the man who makes a woman afraid of losing him. He's the man who can love her deeply, while knowing that losing himself would be a far greater loss. That's the real meaning behind the cold one. Not a man without feelings. A man with feelings under control. Not a man who runs from intimacy. A man who can be intimate without becoming dependent. Not a man who plays games. A man who doesn't need games because his life, character, boundaries, and purpose already speak for him. And when you become that man, attraction stops feeling like a performance. You don't have to chase every signal. You don't have to decode every text. You don't have to compete for someone's attention every hour of the day. You simply show up, communicate clearly, live fully, and allow the other person to respond freely. Sometimes she'll come closer. Sometimes she won't. But either way, you remain standing. And perhaps that's the biggest transformation of all. You came here thinking you were going to learn how to make a woman crave you. But maybe the deeper lesson is learning how to stop craving someone else's approval so desperately that you forget your own value. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Have you ever mistaken chasing someone for loving them? And what changed when you finally decided to stop chasing and start living your own life again? Share your experience, because another man watching. This may recognize himself in your story. And if this made you see attraction, confidence, or your own behavior a little differently, stay with that thought. Don't rush past it. Sometimes the most valuable lesson isn't learning how to make someone want you. It's learning why you wanted their approval so badly in the first place.